So good morning everyone, and thank you to the program directors. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today about the advancement of women in C-suite. We are joining today around the world, 170 countries, where we are celebrating Global Entrepreneurship Week. This is a gathering where entrepreneurs, investors, policymakers, support organizations and others are gathered to discuss topics around advancing inclusive ecosystems. And one of these is the advancement of women in the C-suite. Now, when I consider the issue of advancing women in C-suite, it is to me not about women in and of themselves, but it is really about gender diversity. And the way I like to look at it is to say we are at a time in business where, and we have been in this time for a while, where there's a call and a challenge for change. The change is towards gender diversity, and specifically the role of women in business. The reason it is important that we begin to experience gender diversity and thrive and drive towards it is that the outcomes and the results that come from having gender diversity are ones that business and corporates can no longer afford to do without. Where you find organizations or boards of directors that are made up of people with similar backgrounds, with similar social settings, with similar understandings and similar approaches to issues, the result is that you end up with people who make decisions that do not take into account the wide spectrum of stakeholders that are relevant to such organizations. Therefore, you end up with an increasing risk factor that comes with the decisions that are made by such organizations. The result, therefore, is not in the best interest of shareholders, of employees, and other stakeholders. Therefore, through gender diversity, you want companies that are run by a diverse group of people who can look at issues from different perspectives, who can consider different perspectives, have robust discussions as far as any issue that they are faced with, and come to conclusions or decisions that are based in the best interest of such organizations and the community around them. The crux, therefore, why it is important for women to advance in business and into C-level positions is that you are looking for businesses that are run by a diverse group of people. In the same way that you need young people together with older people in business in order to have different views and perspectives taken into account, you need both men and women in order to have different perspectives taken into account. Now, when you look at what level of women begin to bring impact and change, various studies have shown that when there is at least 30% representation of women in business or in boards, that is where you begin to find incremental impact in terms of voice, incremental impact in terms of input, and incremental impact in terms of having different perspectives being taken into account. This means that you cannot have a situation in organizations where, for example, a board of directors has 8 directors and only 1 is a woman. And why you cannot have that is that 1 out of 8, from a ratio perspective, simply does not bring about the level of diversity and balance in voice that you need to begin to make impact. So at a minimum, studies have shown that you need at least 30% representation of women in order to begin to have impact. There are countries in the world, Norway specifically, Norway in 2007 passed a law, a quota law, where 40% of, where it was said that all listed companies in Norway needed to have 40% of their board members being women. Now in South Africa, we do not have such a law. In January 2017, all JSE listed companies began to be required to have a policy to promote gender diversity at board level. these JSE-listed companies are then required to report their progress in their annual reports. That progress that they are reporting is against their own targets that they've set internally. So as opposed to Norway, where it is legislation that 40% needs to be on boards, South Africa does not have such legislation. Now, I believe in the power of reflection and introspection. And when we look at our country, we have to acknowledge that we have for some time faced a leadership crisis. And what I mean by that is that we have, as a country, been deeply disappointed and faced a crisis when it comes to the quality, when it comes to the bona fides, the authenticity and the integrity of our leaders, both in private and public sector. And for me, this is the most opportune time as a country to look critically at the ecosystem in which we operate and say, really, this is the time to begin to work harder, push harder, and lift harder at raising the number of women at C-level, raising the number of women in business. And why this is so, in particular at this time, the reality is that when you have women in places of authority and in business and in C-level, leading together with men, you are more likely to succeed, you are more likely to take calculated risks in the decisions that are being made for business and for the community, and you are more likely to have a balanced approach in how the business moves forward and in the decisions that the business makes. So where does South Africa stand in terms of progress that we've made for women? I referred earlier to Norway, who have legislated a 40% requirement. A recent study was done by an organization called Business Engage to measure the state of gender diversity on JSE-listed companies. 267 companies were analyzed. 50 of them did not specifically report on gender at board level, which can give an indication that there isn't either a thinking or a policy taking place in those organizations. In 2018, Grant Thornton International Business Reports indicates that only 1/3 of senior roles in South Africa are filled by women, whilst PwC South Africa reports that 63% of Southern African women have an aspiration to, at some point in their careers, reach executive level. A 2018 report produced by a research firm called Jack Hammer shows that of South Africa's top 40 companies, only one has a female CEO, that being Absa. Now, I believe that we are in a place at a country level where we should put together stronger policies, stronger measures in place to drive and enforce towards women advancement into senior roles and in business. Unfortunately, as we have seen as a country, that unless something is in legislation, there is really little movement. We have seen it with BEE. When there's something that's not legislated, movement is little. And therefore, it is time that we push harder towards this. It is also important to remember that when women have already reached such places or continue to reach such places in business, in C-level positions, they then become a point of reference to the ones who are coming behind them. They have the responsibility to be role models, to be points of reference. And therefore, the concept of lifting as you rise becomes all the more important. What do I mean by lifting as you rise? One of the ways that you can lift as you rise is that as you progress in your own career, in your own business, consider the ones who are also trying to get to where you are. And therefore begin to avail yourself as a mentor, begin to avail yourself as a coach, share your experiences, share your knowledge, share your learnings, attend forums such as these in order to impart what you know, in order to learn. Another structured way of lifting as we rise is to ensure that those of us who have decision-making positions, authority positions, begin to develop organizational policies that make it possible for women to receive all the opportunities that they can receive while they are able to fulfill their aspirations of being mothers and of being wives. So that we can move away from an era where to have a career or to have a thriving business, you need to choose the family and have the choice of it's either career or family. We need to move away from that. I would then like to introduce a concept that I suggest a concept which I say moving from women empowerment to moving to women acknowledgement. And I suggest this deliberately, moving away from women empowerment to women acknowledgement, because women have always been strong. Women have always been fearless, capable, intelligent, powerful beings. What we are really calling for today is an acknowledgement of this as a fact. Empowerment suggests that as women, there is something that we lack, that somebody needs to do for us. Whereas acknowledgement suggests that we are inherently capable, inherently intelligent, and inherently able to do equally what men do, and therefore need to be given the room, support, and space to do so. So for me, it is time that we start talking the language of women acknowledgement as opposed to women empowerment. In this era of women acknowledgement, it calls for women of our age who are leading business and corporate South Africa today, who are doing so powerfully and with integrity, to be given room to do so and to be supported. It is a time that calls for us as mothers, as sisters, as aunts, and as fathers, as uncles, to raise our girls in a way that helps them realize that and acknowledge that they are created equal to our boys, and therefore not socially condition them to behave or to do anything other than created equal beings. It is a time that calls for husbands to support their wives and give them room and space to do all and to be all that they can be in business and in corporate. It is also a time where strong women should no longer be referred to as aggressive. It is a time where we need to understand that a number of us in this country were raised by single mothers, whom we call strong, whom we call the best mothers that we've ever met. And yet when we encounter those strong women in corporate, we want to call them aggressive. And so there's a time that we understand that it is not aggressive, it is strength, it is passion, it is drive. Lastly, it is an era where we celebrate the women who came before us, the likes of Mama Winnie Mandela, the likes of Mama Adelaide Tambo, the likes of Hillary Clinton, and the likes of Michelle Obama. These are women who showed us that it is possible to be strong, to be a mother, to be a wife, to lead, and to do all of that with excellence. Why should it be different for us today? And in closing, I'd like to challenge us all to shift our mindsets from the concept and the way of thinking that talks to women empowerment, but towards the concept and way of thinking that talks to women acknowledgement, because we are already capable. I'd like to challenge us to change our approach and understand that the need for women, the need for young people in business, in corporates, is all about diversity. Because what you want is a diversity of mindset and way of thinking that ensures that when we make decisions, all sectors of society are taken into account. And lastly, the challenge for us is to ensure that the girls we raise today, the young women who are gathered here today, have the same opportunities, the same room at the table that our boys will have and the young men here will have. Some of us are parents today, and some of you will be parents at some point. And therefore think about the kind of opportunities that you want your own daughter to have. And that is the way you ought to be thinking, we all ought to be thinking about women going forward, diversity and inclusiveness going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you.